All right, truth seekers, prepare yourselves for another deep plunge into the AI history of Western philosophy. Today, we're unearthing a mind so profoundly radical, so incredibly ahead of its time, that its reverberations still echo through the very foundations of modern science and philosophy. We're talking about Democritus of Abdera. As we embark on this particular deep dive, a quick but crucial note. AI-generated content, specifically this podcast, confabulates presenting ideas as fact. Though our subject is philosophy, we are not philosophers. AI history of Western philosophy's mission, beyond pointing us to the original sources, is to experiment with philosophy as material and generate new possibilities for thought. Now back to our subject, Democritus. He's a figure wrapped in intriguing paradoxes, known both as the laughing philosopher and often hailed as the father of modern science. Can you imagine the sheer audacity? Proposing a thoroughly materialistic universe in ancient Greece, a world just steeped in gods, myths, divine intervention.
Well, absolutely. What's truly fascinating here, and also, incredibly frustrating for scholars, is that despite his immense influence, virtually all of Democritus's original works, and there are apparently loads of them, are lost to us.
Gone.
Completely lost.
Yeah, we're essentially intellectual archaeologists, you could say, painstakingly piecing together this monumental philosophical puzzle from, well, scattered fragments. And crucially, from the comments of later writers, many of whom, and this is key, were his staunch philosophical rivals.
Like Plato and Aristotle.
Exactly, figures like Plato and Aristotle. So you have to read their accounts with a critical eye. The scale of this loss is genuinely staggering. Ancient sources credit Democritus with over 70 treatises. 70, spanning this encyclopedic range of subjects: physics, cosmology, ethics, mathematics, even music. The guy wrote about everything.
So what's our mission today, then, given we have so little directly from him? Well, our mission is to try and reconstruct this foundational figure's revolutionary atomic physics, his surprisingly sophisticated epistemology, that's his theory of knowledge, also his pioneering naturalistic ethics, and ultimately to understand his often suppressed yet, enduring legacy. It's a big task.
Okay. So before we dive headfirst into the atoms themselves, we probably need to set the stage, right? To truly appreciate the atom, we first need to rewind. What kind of world shaped Democritus? What intellectual currents were swirling around him? What unique environment nurtured such a radical mind? Because his ideas certainly didn't emerge in a vacuum.
Precisely. No, Democritus's thought, it kind of burst forth from this incredibly dynamic intellectual period in 5th century BCE Greece. This was a really pivotal era defined by this decisive shift from mythos, those mythological, often anthropomorphic explanations of the cosmos.
Stories about gods making thunder and stuff.
It's exactly that kind of thing. A shift from that to logos, which was this new approach centered on rational, naturalistic inquiry. The early Presocratic philosophers, starting with the Milesians maybe a century earlier, they were the pioneers of this intellectual revolution. They weren't satisfied with stories about gods. They wanted to find the fundamental principles, the archai.
Archai.
Yeah, essentially the first causes or root elements of nature. They did it through observation and reason. They're asking, what's the basic stuff of the universe and how does it actually work?
Right, getting away from myth.
However, by the time Democritus appeared on the scene, this entire project of natural philosophy, it faced a severe crisis, almost a philosophical checkmate, you could say.
A checkmate? How?
This crisis was imposed by the incredibly powerful and seemingly unassailable logic of the Eleatic school, founded by Parmenides.
Parmenides, okay, I know that name. Famous for being difficult.
You could say that. Parmenides, just through pure deductive reasoning, argued that reality, or what is, must be a single, eternal, unchanging, and indivisible whole.
Single, eternal, unchanging, indivisible. That doesn't sound like the world I see.
Exactly. His logic was relentless. Change, motion, plurality, all the things we see, he argued they were logically impossible.
Impossible? Why?
Because they would require the existence of what is not. That is, empty space. The void.
The void again.
Yes. And for Parmenides, what is not was literally unthinkable and unsayable, a sheer contradiction in terms. It simply couldn't exist.
So he basically philosophized the entire observable world out of existence.
Pretty much. He argued it was all an illusion based on faulty senses.
Wow. Okay.
And to further bolster this static monism, Parmenides' student, Zeno of Elea, came up with his famous paradoxes.
Achilles and the tortoise. That one.
That's the most famous one, yeah. And the flying arrow that's never actually moving. Those weren't just clever riddles. They were designed to demonstrate the logical absurdity of motion and divisibility, making the world we perceive, full of movement and many distinct things, seemed like a mere illusion.
So if the Eleatics were right, then trying to understand nature was pointless.
Exactly. If they were right, the whole project of natural philosophy was fundamentally flawed. And here's the core insight where Democritus comes in. Democritus didn't just, propose atoms as another theory of matter. He weaponized them, philosophically speaking.
Weaponized atoms? How?
Well, his atomism wasn't just another theory. It was the most direct and comprehensive philosophical response to this pressing intellectual problem posed by Parmenides. His system was basically engineered to rescue the reality of the phenomenal world, the world we see, from the Eleatic critique.
How did he do that?
By fundamentally reconfiguring the concepts of being and non-being. He found a way to show that plurality and motion could exist without contradicting Parmenides' core assertion about the nature of being. It was honestly a masterstroke of philosophical ingenuity.
Okay, that's the intellectual background. What about his actual environment? We often picture ancient philosophers in dusty robes in Athens.
Right, toiling away in quiet seclusion.
Yeah.
But Democritus wasn't like that. He came from Abdera.
Abdera, where's that? And was it important?
It was a bustling, cosmopolitan hub on the coast of Thrace, near the Nestos River. A prosperous and strategically important Ionian Greek colony, it had actually been reestablished around 544 BCE by refugees from the city of Teos, who were fleeing the Persian invasion.
So, a city founded by refugees, that might make it more open-minded from the start.
Quite possibly. That history of displacement and resettlement might have fostered a more adaptable outlook. And the city's wealth was truly remarkable. It got rich largely from brisk trade with the Thracian interior. In the 5th century BCE, Abdera was the third richest member of the Athenian-led Delian League. That's serious money.
Third richest. Wow. So it wasn't some backwater.
Not at all. This economic power and its status as a major port naturally fostered a cosmopolitan environment. It exposed its citizens to a wide array of cultures, goods, and most importantly for us, diverse ideas.
A melting pot of ideas then.
Definitely. Now, later writers like Cicero would unfairly ridicule Abderites as a byword for stupidity.
Seriously?
Who knows, maybe some local rivalry or stereotype. But the city's actual intellectual contributions in the classical period were anything but stupid. It was notably the birthplace of not only Democritus, but also the highly influential sophist, Protagoras.
Protagoras, too. Okay, so Abdera was punching above its weight intellectually.
Absolutely. So the implication for Democritus is clear. This vibrant context of commercial and cultural exchange may be far from the, let's say, somewhat insular intellectual centers like Athens. It provided fertile ground for the wide-ranging empirical and cross-disciplinary inquiry that truly defined his work. He wasn't just stuck in one tradition. He was exposed to this rich tapestry of ancient worldviews.
That makes sense. A port city, lots of trade, lots of different people coming through.
Exactly. And that cosmopolitan background undeniably helped shape his worldview. Ancient sources consistently report that Democritus was born into a wealthy and well-connected family there, around 460 BCE. There's even this famous, maybe slightly embellished anecdote that his father's estate was so vast, he was able to house and entertain the entire army of the Persian king Xerxes during its march through Thrace.
The whole army. That's a lot of catering.
It suggests serious wealth, doesn't it? And when his father died, Democritus inherited a considerable fortune. But instead of investing it in, ships or land like most wealthy Greeks would,
He did something different.
he used it entirely to satisfy what was described as an extraordinary thirst for knowledge. And he pursued this through extensive, almost unprecedented travel.
So he used his inheritance to travel and learn. That's unusual.
Very. At a time when travel was arguably the main way to get an advanced education. Democritus embarked on this journey of intellectual discovery that was likely unparalleled among his contemporaries. Imagine you've inherited a fortune in ancient Greece. Most would double down on the family business. Democritus. He basically bought a passport to knowledge.
Where did he go?
He's reported to have traveled widely throughout the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. Spent 5 years in Egypt studying mathematics with priests, visited Persia and Babylon to learn from the Chaldean Magi. There's even speculation he ventured as far as India and Ethiopia.
Wow, some serious mileage.
He himself declared, and I quote, "Of all my contemporaries, I have covered the most ground in my travels, making the most exhaustive inquiries the while. I have seen the most climates and countries and listened to the greatest number of learned men."
He sounds proud of it, and rightly so.
Absolutely. This deep immersion in diverse knowledge systems, Egyptian geometry, Babylonian astronomy, who knows what else, was undoubtedly the foundation of his encyclopedic learning.
But you mentioned Athens earlier. How did he fit in there?
Well, that's the interesting thing. Despite all this worldliness and his intellectual prowess, he remained something of an outsider to the philosophical circles in Athens, which were starting to coalesce around Socrates. He famously complained about his visit there, "I came to Athens and no one knew me."
No one knew him, even with his travels and learning.
Apparently not. And there's an anecdote that the aging philosopher Anaxagoras even refused to see him.
Ouch. Why? Too radical.
Maybe. It raises an important question, though. Did this very detachment, this kind of intellectual outsider status, give him the freedom to develop a system so radically different from the Athenian mainstream? A system that, just a few decades later would be systematically rejected and undermined by figures like Plato, who found absolutely no room for it in his own grand vision.
So maybe being outside the in crowd let him think more freely.
It seems plausible. Being outside the prevailing intellectual currents might have allowed him to forge a truly original path, unburdened by established dogmas. And Democritus was also famously prolific. We mentioned the 70 books Diogenes Laertius listed.
Yeah, incredible.
Across ethics, physics, mathematics, cosmology, music, medicine. Though they're all lost, the sheer breadth of the titles shows a mind seeking a unified, naturalistic explanation for literally everything. Every aspect of the world and human experience.
A grand unified theory of everything, ancient Greek style.
You could almost say that, yeah.
Okay, let's get to it then. The core of his legacy, the atom. It sounds so familiar to us now, almost basic science. But back then, to conceive of a world built from invisible, indivisible particles, it must have been utterly revolutionary.
Oh, completely. It challenged every prevailing notion of matter and reality. It stood as a direct refutation of the philosophical giants who came before him, especially Parmenides.
Now, did he come up with it entirely on his own, or was there someone before him?
That's a crucial clarification. The atomist tradition actually begins with Leucippus of Miletus. He's consistently identified by ancient authorities, most notably Aristotle, as Democritus' teacher and the actual originator of the atomic theory.
Leucippus. Okay, so why do we talk about Democritus so much more?
Because the historical record for Leucippus is, exceptionally sparse. Almost nothing is known about his life. Only a single sentence of his work is preserved verbatim.
One sentence, that's it.
That's it. So, distinguishing the precise contributions of Leucippus from those of his more famous student Democritus is a huge scholarly challenge. Later sources often just attribute the theory to them jointly, Leucippus and Democritus.
So how do scholars figure out who did what?
Well, the prevailing consensus, generally following Aristotle's lead, attributes the foundational principles to Leucippus. This includes that crucial philosophical move of postulating atoms and the void as a direct response to the Eleatics, plus a basic cosmogony, a theory of how worlds form.
Okay, so Leucippus laid the groundwork. What did Democritus add?
Democritus is credited with the immense task of systematizing and elaborating upon this foundation. He worked out the detailed application of atomism to this vast range of phenomena, supported it with a sophisticated epistemology, his theory of knowledge, and extended its principles to form a comprehensive worldview covering biology, anthropology, ethics.
Everything.
So Leucippus built the cornerstone, Democritus built the whole cathedral.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
Okay, let's get into the genius of the system itself. You mentioned Parmenides' trapping motion in this logical fortress. How did Democritus get around that?
Right. Imagine Parmenides, the philosophical heavyweight, building this impenetrable fortress of logic that locks out all motion and multiplicity. Democritus didn't try to bash through the walls. He cleverly picked up Parmenides' own blueprints, relabeled a few rooms, you could say, and built an entirely new world inside that fortress.
Using Parmenides' own logic against him.
Kind of, yeah. Their system is built upon two fundamental, oppositely characterized principles. First, indivisible bodies, which they called atomos.
Atomos meaning uncuttable. Exactly. And second, empty space, which they called the keinon, or the void.
Atoms in the void, okay.
The elegance lies in how this resolves the Eleatic paradox. They didn't directly refute Parmenides' core logic. They actually conceded his premise.
Which was?
That true being must be eternal, indivisible, and internally unchanging. But instead of applying it to the cosmos as a whole, like Parmenides did, they applied it to an infinite plurality of microscopic entities. Each single atom, then, is in effect a tiny, self-contained Parmenidean one.
Ah, okay. So being exists, but there are infinitely many of them, the atoms.
Precisely. Each atom fits Parmenides' definition of being.
But what about the void? Parmenides said, what is not can't exist.
And here came their most audacious move. They just posited that what is not the void, the keenan, is just as real as what is the atoms.
Whoa, they just declared nothing to be something.
Ontologically speaking, yes, they gave it equal status. By doing so, they provided the necessary condition for motion and plurality that Parmenides had logically banished. They basically created a philosophical space for the observable world to exist. Without this radical move, without the void, atoms couldn't move, collide, or combine. Our dynamic, diverse world would be impossible.
That is audacious. So tell me more about these atoms. What were they like?
Well, these atoms, the atomos, are the primary fundamental constituents of reality, an infinite number of them. Solid, indivisible particles, uncuttable. They are eternal, ungenerated, and indestructible. They've always existed and always will.
All made of the same stuff.
Yes, they're all made of a single uniform substance. But they differ from one another only in their quantitative properties.
Quantitative, meaning?
Meaning things you can measure or describe structurally. Specifically, their shape or schema,
Oh.
their arrangement or order relative to one another, called taxes, and their orientation or position, thesis.
So shape, arrangement, position, not color or taste.
Nope. Those qualities come later in how we perceive them. The atoms themselves only have these structural differences. They also vary in size. Democritus seems to have allowed for a vast range of sizes, maybe even some large enough, hypothetically, to be perceived, though mostly microscopic.
And they're moving. How? Did something push them?
Crucially, no external pusher needed. They're in constant, ceaseless motion. It's an inherent and eternal property of atoms. They just move. This inherent motion was a profound assertion. It removes the need for a god to kickstart the universe or keep it going. They move on their own.
Okay, so infinite atoms with different shapes and sizes, constantly moving in the void.
Exactly. And the void, the keenan, this empty space.
Yeah.
It was their most direct challenge to Parmenides. They basically argued from the observable fact of motion, things do move, we see it, that a void must be real to allow that movement.
So they flipped Parmenides' logic. He said no void means no motion. They said motion means there must be a void.
Precisely. They reversed the argument. This void, which they equated with nothing or what is not, was granted ontological status equal to being, to the atoms. It's the infinite expanse that separates the atoms, allowing them to move freely, to collide, and importantly, to combine without ever truly fusing into one another.
Without fusing, how do they form objects then? Like this table or me?
Right. So from these two fundamental principles, atoms and void all macroscopic objects, and their perceived qualities are just temporary aggregations. Clusters of atoms. Objects are formed not by a true fusion, but by mechanical entanglement. Think of it like tiny Legos or hooks and eyes.
Hooks and eyes. Seriously.
Well, maybe not literally hooks and eyes, but the idea is atoms hooked together via tiny barbs, curves, irregularities in their shapes that allow them to interlock. This allows them to form stable structures while still retaining their individual atomic integrity. They're linked, but still distinct atoms.
Okay, like microscopic Velcro, maybe?
Kind of. And the phenomenal properties of these objects, whether something feels hard or soft or looks fluid or dense, are explained entirely by the shapes of their constituent atoms and the proportion of void interspersed among them.
So hardness comes from?
Hard objects have atoms that are very tightly packed and securely interlocked with very little void between them. Soft objects have more void, or atoms that are less securely interlocked, allowing for more give, more flexibility.
It's all just shape and space.
It's an elegant, purely mechanistic explanation for the incredible diversity of the world around us. No magic, just atomic geometry and movement.
This is where Democritus really broke from tradition, isn't it? This purely mechanical universe. How did he explain the origin of, well, everything, the cosmos?
Yes, this is where he truly diverged from so much of ancient thought. His vision of the universe's origin is purely mechanical. No gods pulling strings, no intelligent design involved at all. The formation of these worlds, or cosmoi, which means ordered systems or universes in Greek, is a purely mechanical process, devoid of purpose, design, or divine intervention.
So how does a world start then in this view?
Within the infinite void, you have these infinite atoms in ceaseless random motion. Purely by chance, sometimes a large cluster of atoms happens to gather together. This cluster then develops a vortex or a whirl, which he called a dyne.
A cosmic whirlpool of atoms.
Essentially, yes. And this vortex then acts as a cosmic sorting mechanism through countless collisions within the whirl. The heavier and larger atoms tend to get driven toward the center. They aggregate there to form a dense body like the Earth.
How did he picture the Earth?
He, reflecting common ancient astronomical ideas, conceived of it as a flat cylindrical drum shape, not a sphere.
A flat drum. Okay. And the stars.
The lighter, finer atoms get pushed out to the periphery of the whirl. Their rapid motion causes them to ignite, forming the sun, the moon, and the stars.
All just sorted by weight and motion in the vortex.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And here's a truly mind-bending implication of this process.
Go on.
This cosmogonical process, this world formation, it's not a unique, singular event. It didn't just happen once.
Wait, what?
Given an infinite supply of atoms, moving in an infinite void over infinite time. Such worlds must form, decay, and reform endlessly. It's a statistical necessity.
So there are other worlds out there.
Innumerable worlds, according to the atomist. Some similar to our own, maybe with life. Others barren and lifeless. Still others constantly in the process of formation or dissolution right now.
That's basically the multiverse concept. In 400 BCE.
It's astonishingly modern, isn't it? An infinite universe churning out worlds through mechanical processes.
Mind blown. Okay, so what governs all this? Is it just random chaos?
Ah, that's the fascinating part. While the initial encounters might be random, the causality that governs this universe is one of strict, unbroken necessity. Enanche.
Enanche necessity. So not random.
Not random in its operation, no. It's fate. But a cosmic fate woven entirely by the deterministic interactions of atoms. It leaves no room for uncaused chance or divine whim once things get going. The single surviving fragment of Leucippus, Democritus' teacher, states this principle unequivocally. Nothing happens at random, Maton, but everything for a reason, logos, and by necessity, enanche.
Everything for a reason and by necessity.
Yes. In this mechanistic framework, every single event, from the motion of one single atom to the formation of an entire cosmos, is the determined outcome of a prior chain of atomic collisions. There is absolutely no room for uncaused chance, for divine will intervening, or for any teleological purpose.
Teleological meaning?
Meaning there's no inherent goal or end toward which things are striving. It's not evolving towards perfection or fulfilling a divine plan.
It just is, operating like a machine.
Exactly. A vast, intricate machine where every cog's movement is determined by the one before it. A deterministic ballet of atoms.
Okay, this is a very stark, mechanical picture of reality. So if everything is just atoms and void, where do we sit in? Human experience. How do we perceive anything? How do we know? What even are we in this picture?
Right, fundamental questions. And Democritus tackled them head on with answers that were, again, astonishingly ahead of their time and deeply consistent with his broader atomic theory.
So, perception first. How do we see or hear or taste if it's all just atoms?
Consistent with his mechanistic physics, Democritus proposed a purely physical explanation for perception and sensation. No spirits or weird rays involved. He theorized that all macroscopic objects constantly emit these thin, coherent films of atoms from their surfaces.
Films of atoms, like the object is shedding.
Exactly. These films, he called them idola singular eidolon, are like miniature images or husks that retain the shape and the atomic arrangement of the object's surface.
So a tiny atomic copy of the object flies off it.
That's the idea. These atomic films then travel through the void and enter the body's sense organs.
Okay, so for vision.
For vision, an eidolon from the object enters your eye. It makes a physical impression on the soul atoms within the eye. We'll get to soul atoms, essentially, as he put it, stamping a copy of the object onto your organ of sight.
Stamping a copy. Physically. And other senses. Taste. Touch.
All operate on the same principle of direct physical contact. Taste, for instance, is the result of atoms of a certain shape, physically interacting with the atoms of your tongue. Democritus even suggested that sweet tastes are caused by smooth, round atoms hitting the tongue, while bitter or sour tastes come from sharp, jagged atoms.
He tried to link specific shapes to specific tastes. That's bold.
Very. And similarly, odors, sounds, tactile sensations, they're all explained by the impact of different types of atoms or atomic aggregates on their respective sense organs. It's an entire system of physical interaction. He demystified how we experience the world by grounding it entirely in atomic movements. No magic here, just mechanics.
Okay, if perception is just atoms hitting us, basically, what does that mean for knowledge? Can we trust what we perceive?
Now you're hitting on one of his most significant contributions. This mechanistic theory of perception led Democritus to a remarkably modern and sophisticated idea about knowledge. He saw a big difference between what we think we know through our senses and what is truly real. He made this critical distinction between two forms of knowledge.
Two kinds. Okay, what are they?
First, there's what he called bastard or obscure knowledge, nom scoti.
Bastard knowledge. That sounds harsh.
It does, doesn't it? This is the knowledge that comes to us through our five senses. He deemed it bastard or obscure because he saw it as inherently superficial and potentially deceptive.
Why deceptive?
because the senses, in his view, don't give us direct access to reality itself. They only report the effects of those atomic films hitting our sense organs. So the colors, tastes, sounds, textures we perceive, they aren't intrinsic properties of the objects themselves.
They aren't. Redness isn't in the apple.
Not according to Democritus. These qualities are relational phenomena. They arise from the interaction between the external atoms from the apple and the atoms of our own bodies, our eyes, tongue, etc. They're subjective interpretations, not objective truth.
So the world out there is actually colorless and tasteless.
According to him, yes.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a philosophical hair split. It was Democritus basically inventing the distinction between what philosophers later called primary and secondary qualities. It was a huge conceptual leap.
Primary and secondary qualities, remind me.
Primary qualities are the ones inherent in the object itself, independent of us perceiving them. For Democritus, that's the properties of the atoms: shape, size, arrangement, motion, quantitative stuff. Secondary qualities are the ones that depend on the perceiver: color, taste, sound, smell, texture. Qualitative stuff that arises from the interaction.
So he established this two-tiered reality.
Exactly. On one hand, the objective world of physics. Colorless, tasteless, silent, consisting only of atoms with quantitative properties moving in the void. On the other hand, the subjective world of human experience, filled with the qualitative richness of sensory perception.
Is there a quote that sums this up?
There's a famous fragment that nails it. By convention, nomos, sweet. By convention, bitter. By convention, hot. By convention, cold. By convention, color. But in reality, et atoms and void.
By convention, but in reality, atoms and void. Wow. That's stark.
It perfectly encapsulates his idea. What we perceive as qualities are merely human constructs, conventions in most. The true reality is just atoms and voids.
Okay, but this raises a huge problem, doesn't it? A classic philosophical dilemma.
Which is?
If all our information about the world comes through the senses, and the senses are fundamentally unreliable reporters of objective reality, how can we possibly trust our intellect's conclusions about the unseen reality of atoms and void? How do we know they exist if the senses lie?
You've hit the nail on the head. That is the profound challenge in his own epistemology. How do you get from bastard knowledge to legitimate knowledge?
Legitimate knowledge, is that the second kind?
Yes, non nisi. Genuine or legitimate knowledge. This is the province of the intellect, of reason, logos. It's the ability to move beyond sensory appearances to grasp the underlying objective reality, the existence, properties, and motions of atoms and the void.
But how? If the senses are the only input, did Democritus address this tension?
He seems to have been acutely aware of it. There's this striking fragment where the senses actually address the mind, almost accusingly. They say, "Wretched mind, do you take your evidence from us and then overthrow us? Our overthrow is your downfall."
Oh, the senses are telling the mind it's sawing off the branch it's sitting on.
Exactly. It's a powerful statement of the inherent challenge. How can reason claim to know a reality that undermines the very senses reason relies upon for data?
So did he solve it?
It's not clear he offered a complete solution that satisfied everyone. Even later atomists like Epicurus wrestled with this. But it suggests Democritus didn't advocate a simple rejection of sensory evidence. It was more like a complex process. Reason has to critically analyze and interpret sensory data to achieve that legitimate understanding. The senses provide the raw material, maybe hints or clues. But the intellect, through rigorous thought, inference, and perhaps analogy, must refine and interpret that data to penetrate beyond appearances to the underlying atomic reality. It's a continuous critical dialogue between experience and reason.
Okay, so it's tricky. Now, you mentioned soul atoms when talking about vision. What did he think the soul was? Still atoms.
Absolutely. In keeping with his thoroughgoing materialism, Democritus extended his atomic theory to the very nature of life and the soul, or psyche. The soul, for Democritus, is not some immaterial, immortal, supernatural entity. It is, like everything else in the universe, composed of atoms.
Just regular atoms, or special ones.
Special ones. He identified the soul atoms as being the very finest, the smoothest, the most mobile, and perfectly spherical atoms. He also associated them with the element of fire, probably because of their rapid vital motion. Fire seems alive, right?
Smooth, round, fast atoms. Okay, where are they in the body? In the head? The heart?
Not localized in a single organ, interestingly. He thought they were distributed throughout the entire body, intermingling with the other coarser atoms that make up our flesh and organs.
So they're everywhere inside us.
Yes. And it's the rapid motion of these soul atoms that imparts life, warmth, sensation, and even thought to the organism.
Thought is just moving soul atoms.
Pretty much. Thought itself in this framework is understood as a purely physical process. Nothing more than the local rearrangement and motion of these soul atoms, particularly, he thought, those concentrated in the brain.
How do we keep these soul atoms? Do they run out?
That's where breathing comes in. Life is sustained through respiration. Breathing constantly replenishes the body supply of soul atoms from the surrounding air, replacing those atoms that are continually being lost through the skin. It's like a constant atomic exchange, keeping the internal fire of soul atoms burning.
Okay. The implications here seem pretty significant, especially for, well, the end of life.
Exactly. With the soul now reduced to mere arrangements of atoms, the truly unsettling question emerges. What happens after death?
And Democritus' answer
Is perhaps his most unyielding, most stark conclusion. A direct and inescapable consequence of his physicalist psychology, the absolute mortality of the soul.
no afterlife, no immortal soul.
None whatsoever. At death, the containment mechanism of the body fails. Respiration ceases. The soul atoms are no longer held together within the organism. They simply disperse back into the infinite void, just like the atoms of the body itself. Gone. Scattered.
That's it. Lights out.
For Democritus, yes. No personal survival after death, no immortal soul to be judged or rewarded or punished in an afterlife.
That must have been controversial, to say the least, in ancient Greece.
Controversial is putting it mildly. It flew in the face of so many religious and philosophical traditions. It's a completely naturalistic and, for many, probably quite a sobering conclusion. But it's entirely consistent with his atomic worldview.
Okay, so we have this universe. Infinite atoms, infinite void, a mechanical necessity, innumerable worlds, perception via atomic films, knowledge divided into bastard and legitimate, and a mortal soul made of fire atoms that disperses at death. It seems bleak, maybe?
Yeah.
Where do ethics fit in? How do you live a good life in that kind of universe?
It might seem bleak from a certain perspective, but Democritus, often called the laughing philosopher, actually had a surprisingly sophisticated answer to that very question. He developed a sophisticated ethical system that was deeply grounded in his naturalistic worldview. It wasn't an afterthought. It seems to have been central to his project.
The laughing philosopher. Why was he called that? Did he find the atomic universe funny?
Maybe not funny, ha-ha, but perhaps he found a kind of cheerful acceptance in understanding the true nature of things, free from superstition. The name points towards his ethical goal. He argued that the ultimate goal, the telos, of human life is to achieve euthymia.
Euthymia. What does that mean exactly?
It's best translated as cheerfulness, contentment, or tranquility, a state of inner well-being. And it's crucial to understand ancient sources are clear on this. Democritus carefully distinguished euthymia from simple pleasure, hedon.
So it's not just about seeking pleasure. He wasn't a hedonist.
No, that was a common misinterpretation, even in antiquity, sometimes confusing him with Epicurus later on. Euthymia is deeper, more stable. Diogenes Laertius preserves a crucial definition: a state in which the soul is peacefully and tranquilly, undisturbed by fear or superstition or any other feeling.
Undisturbed, tranquil, peaceful. Okay.
Right. Democritus used related terms, too, like euesto for well-being, ataraxia for undisturbedness, and harmonia for harmony. It suggests a rich, comprehensive conception of psychological flourishing.
And this state, it's internal, not about external stuff.
Absolutely internal. As one fragment eloquently declares, happiness does not dwell in flocks or gold. It is the soul which is the home of a person's daemon.
Your well-being resides within your soul.
Okay, but again, the soul is just atoms. How does euthymia, this inner peace, connect to his physics?
The connection is profound and, for Democritus, absolutely central. His materialist explanation of the universe isn't just abstract science, it serves a vital therapeutic purpose.
Therapeutic? How?
By demonstrating that all phenomena, even scary ones like thunder, lightning, earthquakes, or the inevitability of death, are just the result of necessary mechanical atomic interactions. Atomism effectively eliminates the primary sources of existential anxiety in the ancient world, which were belief in capricious, unpredictable, punishing gods who might strike you down for arbitrary reasons, and the pervasive fear of an unknown and potentially terrifying afterlife, punishment, judgment, all that.
So understanding the atoms takes away the fear. Precisely. Understanding the true nature of the cosmos, a world of atoms moving according to impersonal natural law, is, for Democritus, the first and most crucial step to liberating the soul from the passions of fear and superstition. Because it's those passions, fear, and superstition that are the chief obstacles to achieving euthymia. They disturb the soul's tranquility.
So his physics is the medicine for achieving his ethics.
That's a great way to see it. It's a philosophy designed to bring peace of mind through rational insight into the atomic structure of reality. Understanding leads to tranquility.
Okay, so understanding the physics is step one. How else do we achieve this euthymia? Did he give practical advice?
He did. The surviving ethical fragments, though they are disjointed, like little nuggets of advice, outline a remarkably practical and psychologically astute path. The method is both cognitive, changing how you think, and behavioral, changing how you act. It requires cultivating reason and disciplining desire.
Okay, break that down. Cultivating reason.
Yes. First, cultivation of wisdom and reason. Democritus believed right thinking is the absolute foundation of right living. He states that wisdom, phronesis, is the source of three key abilities: to counsel well, to speak unerringly, and to do one's duty. Good judgment, good speech, good action all flow from wisdom. He also said that ignorance of what is better is the ultimate cause of error and wrongdoing. So perfecting the soul through reason is paramount. He even said physical strength without intelligence does nothing to improve the soul.
So think clearly, live well. Makes sense. What about disciplining desire?
Second key point, moderation and discernment. A tranquil life, he argued, requires mastering your desires. Now, this isn't about becoming an ascetic, denying all pleasure. It's about not seeking pleasure solely in mortal things, things that are fleeting and ultimately unsatisfying. And it's about learning to distinguish between beneficial and harmful pleasures, choosing only those that are fine, or kalos, noble, beautiful, fitting.
So not all pleasures are created equal.
Exactly. He noted that both excess and deficiency cause great disturbance in the soul. Too much or too little throws you off balance.
Yeah.
Moderation actually enhances enjoyment and stability. He particularly warns against the pleasures from the belly, meaning overindulgence in food, drink, sex, which he notes are brief and inevitably followed by pain or the renewed torment of desire. It's very pragmatic. Aim for stable well-being, not fleeting highs and subsequent lows.
Right. Manage your desires. Choose wisely. What else?
Third, and this is really interesting, he championed an internal locus of control, a radical internalization of morality.
Internal locus of control, meaning?
Meaning his ethics aren't based on following external laws just because they're laws or behaving well out of fear of punishment from gods or society. It's based on profound self-respect.
Self-respect as the basis of morality.
Yes. There's a powerful pair of fragments where he devises, feel no more shame before other people than before yourself. Most of all, feel shame before yourself, and set this up as a law for your soul so as to do nothing inappropriate.
Wow, don't worry about what others think as much as what you think of yourself.
Exactly. You internalize the moral authority. You become your own strictest judge because you respect yourself too much to act inappropriately, even if no one is watching. That's a very strong internal compass.
That is powerful. Any other techniques?
Yes. Finally, he also advocates for a form of cognitive reframing, almost like ancient cognitive therapy.
Cognitive reframing, like changing how you look at things.
Precisely. He advises that you should focus on what is attainable and be content with what you actually have, rather than constantly dwelling on those who are envied and admired, wanting what they have. And to cultivate contentment, he suggests something quite striking. Consider the lives of those in distress, reflecting on their intense sufferings, in order that your own possessions and condition may seem great and enviable.
Look at those worse off to appreciate what you have. That sounds a bit harsh, but maybe effective.
It's a stark technique, for sure. But the psychological principle is sound. Shifting your perspective, your frame of reference, can foster gratitude and reduce dissatisfaction. It anticipates modern psychological approaches to well-being by centuries.
So wisdom, moderation, self-respect, and reframing, that's the path to euthymia.
That seems to be the core of his practical ethics, yes.
And this whole ethical system, it's really remarkable for being thoroughly naturalistic, isn't it?
Absolutely. It stands out because it doesn't rely on any external authority or supernatural promises.
No divine lawgiver, no judging God, no heaven or hell.
None of that. No appeal to a supernatural judge, no afterlife rewards or punishments driving your behavior. Goodness, for Democritus isn't some innate quality you're born with. It's something that must be developed through discipline and practice, through reason.
And the ultimate standard is just the state of your soul.
The state of the soul itself, yes, which, remember, is understood in purely physical terms.
Right, the atoms. So euthymia is?
Euthymia, the goal, is a soul where the constituent soul atoms are in a state of gentle, harmonious, undisturbed motion. Tranquil atoms.
And an unhappy soul.
A disturbed or unhappy soul is one where these soul atoms are in a state of chaotic, violent, tumultuous motion. disturbed atoms.
So ethical practice is literally about calming your atoms.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Ethical practice, in this view, is the art of regulating the physical motions within your own soul to achieve a stable, balanced, harmonious state. It's a completely self-contained, self-referential moral philosophy. Your inner atomic state is your morality and your well-being.
Mind-blowing. Okay, a philosophy this bold, this challenging to conventionalism, materialism, atheism, mortality, determinism, must have ruffled some serious feathers, right? How was it received?
Ruffled feathers is an understatement. The immediate reception of Democritus's philosophy by the dominant Athenian schools, especially Plato and Aristotle, was overwhelmingly negative, hostile even.
Why so hostile?
Because his comprehensive materialism wasn't just another theory on the shelf. It posed an existential threat, a fundamental challenge to the teleological and idealistic systems that Plato and Aristotle were building.
Teleological and idealistic, meaning purposeful and based on non-material ideas.
Exactly. Democritus's world had no inherent purpose and was purely material. Theirs was full of purpose and grounded in non-material forms or essences. They were building worldviews diametrically opposed to his. So the subsequent history of his influence is in large part the story of an ideological battle over the fundamental nature of reality itself.
Let's start with Plato. You said he never even mentions Democritus.
Right. Plato's silent opposition. It's quite striking. Plato never mentions Democritus by name in his entire corpus, his collected works. Ancient commentators chalk this up to intense philosophical animosity. He apparently disliked Democritus that much.
So he just pretended he didn't exist?
In a way, yes. But you can also read Plato's entire philosophical project as a kind of systematic, implicit refutation of the Democritian worldview, even without naming the opponent.
How so? Where does he engage with the ideas?
Well, take his cosmological dialogue, the Timaeus. Plato implicitly engages with atomism there, but only to radically transform it. He replaces Democritus's infinite variety of randomly shaped atoms with this highly ordered mathematical system. 5 regular geometric solids, the Platonic solids.
The cube, tetrahedron, etc.
Those are the ones. And he argued they were constructed from 2 basic types of right-angled triangles. This whole move was designed to impose mathematical harmony and intelligent design onto the material world.
Directly countering Democritus's random shapes and chance formation.
Exactly. Plato's fundamental disagreements were just irreconcilable. He rejected the void. He argued that cosmos was the purposeful creation of a divine craftsman, the demiurge. And he asserted that ultimate reality consists not of physical atoms, but of eternal, immaterial, intelligible forms, the form of justice, the form of beauty, the form of the good. Everything Democritus stood for, Plato sought to systematically undermine or replace.
Okay, so Plato fought him with silence and counter-argument. What about Aristotle? You said he engaged more directly.
Yes. Aristotle's explicit critique was quite vocal and extensive. Unlike Plato, Aristotle frequently and explicitly engaged with Democritus's ideas. He actually regarded Democritus as his most significant predecessor and rival in natural philosophy.
Did he respect him at all?
He did praise Democritus sometimes for arguing from sound scientific considerations or trying to explain things naturally. But his criticisms were deep and systematic.
What were his main objections?
First, like Plato, a rejection of the void. Aristotle argued the void was a logical and physical impossibility. He had this famous argument that in a vacuum which offers no resistance, motion would have to be instantaneous.
Infinite speed.
Yes, which he thought was absurd. Therefore, no void.
Okay, what else?
Second, he made an argument for a continuum. Against the core atomist idea of indivisible particles, Aristotle maintained that matter was a continuum. It could be divided infinitely, in principle. There were no fundamental, uncuttable units.
So no atoms for Aristotle either.
Correct. But perhaps his most fundamental critique, the deepest disagreement, was over teleology versus mechanism.
Purpose versus machine again.
Exactly. For Aristotle, all natural beings and processes are directed toward an end or purpose, a telos. An acorn's telos is to become an oak tree. That's its inherent goal. He found Democritus's purely mechanistic account. Everything just happens because atoms collide necessarily to be explanatorily inadequate. It didn't answer the why in the right way for Aristotle.
It explained how, but not why things aimed for certain ends.
Precisely. Aristotle particularly criticized Democritus for failing to provide a primary cause for motion itself. Why do atoms move eternally? Democritus just posits it as a fact. Aristotle needed a deeper explanation, ultimately pointing towards his concept of an unmoved mover. For Aristotle, simply saying atoms move wasn't enough. There had to be a reason, a purpose, a final cause driving that motion to truly explain it.
Wow. Okay, the differences are stark. Maybe we can quickly recap the core contrasts, just to see them side by side.
Good idea. So, fundamental constituents. Democritus has atoms and void. Plato has immaterial forms and the receptacle, with the physical world made of geometric solids. Aristotle has form and matter composites, with 4 elements plus ether.
Totally different building blocks. Nature of reality.
Democritus, materialistic. Reality is atoms void. Perceived qualities are subjective. Plato, idealistic. True reality is the forms. Physical world is an imperfect copy. Aristotle, hylomorphic. Reality is individual substances, composites of matter and form. Form gives essence.
Causality.
Democritus, mechanistic, deterministic, no purpose. Telos. Plato, teleological, purposeful creation by a demiurge.
Right.
Aristotle, teleological, intrinsic telos in things, explained by his 4 causes. Material, formal, efficient, final.
Role of void space.
Democritus, void is crucial. A necessary non-being allowing motion. Plato, no void in the cosmos, just the receptacle as a substrate. Aristotle, no void, nature abhors a vacuum. Universe is a continuous plenum.
An origin of cosmos.
Democritus, uncreated, eternal, innumerable worlds formed by chance and necessity. Plato, created, single cosmos designed by the demiurge. Aristotle, uncreated, eternal, but a single, unique cosmos, always existing in its purposeful structure.
It's like 3 completely different universes described by 3 brilliant minds.
It really is a fundamental clash of worldviews.
So, with Plato and Aristotle basically shutting Democritus down, did atomism just die out?
It definitely went underground, you could say, overshadowed by the dominance of Platonism and Aristotelianism for centuries. But it wasn't completely extinguished. It found a powerful revival and significantly an adaptation in Epicurus of Samos.
Epicurus, another big name, lived
Yeah.
a bit later.
Yes, roughly 341 to 270 BCE. Epicurus made Democritian physics the foundational core of his own highly influential ethical and philosophical school, Epicureanism.
So he liked the atoms and void stuff.
He adopted the core tenets, absolutely. A universe composed of atoms and void, the mortality of the soul, the rejection of divine intervention in worldly affairs. He saw Democritus as providing the perfect scientific framework for achieving a life free from fear, especially fear of death and the gods.
But you said adaptation. What did he change?
He introduced one crucial and very famous modification, the atomic swerve, or clinamen in Latin.
The swerve, what's that?
Epicurus argued that as atoms fall through the void, he pictured them falling downwards. Originally, they occasionally swerve, randomly, unpredictably, just a tiny deviation from their path.
Why add a random swerve? That seems random.
He posited it for 2 main reasons, one physical, one philosophical. Physically, he thought it provided a necessary mechanism for atoms, which would otherwise just fall in parallel lines forever, to actually collide and form complex bodies. The swerve initiates interaction.
Okay, a mechanical fix. What was the philosophical reason?
This was arguably more important for him. The swerve served to break the rigid causal chain of Democritian determinism. Remember, everything by necessity.
Right. No room for free will.
Exactly. Epicurus believed this random indeterminacy introduced by the swerve was absolutely necessary to allow for human free will. And he considered free will a prerequisite for moral responsibility. How can you praise or blame someone if their actions were predetermined from the beginning of time?
Ah, so the swerve saves free will from determinism.
That was the idea. This modification is fascinating because it reveals how threatening even a sympathetic successor like Epicurus found the original, unyielding determinism of Democritus' system. Free will was non-negotiable for Epicurus' ethics, which focused on making wise choices to achieve pleasure and avoid pain.
Okay, so Epicurus kept atomism alive but tweaked it. How did these ideas survive through the ages, especially when Plato and Aristotle were so dominant?
The most important conduit, the lifeline for atomism getting from antiquity to the modern world, was the Roman poet Titus Lucretius Carus, 1st century BCE.
Lucretius, De Rerum Natura.
Exactly, on the nature of things. His magnificent epic poem is this comprehensive, passionate, beautiful exposition of Epicureanism, which heavily relies on Democritus' physics. Lucretius faithfully rendered the entire atomist worldview, atoms and void, mechanical world formation, the atomic soul, no afterlife, the critique of superstition and fear of gods into powerful Latin hexameter verse.
He wrote a science textbook as an epic poem.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And it was brilliant. This poetic masterpiece literally ensured the survival of the core ideas. When most of the original Greek prose works by Democritus and even Epicurus were lost, Lucretius's poem survived, providing a coherent, compelling account of atomism. Without De Rerum Natura, the atomic theory might have been a mere footnote in intellectual history for far, far longer, just buried under centuries of dominant Platonic and Aristotelian thought.
So for like 1,000 years during the Middle Ages, atomism was basically gone.
Pretty much disappeared from mainstream thought, yeah. It's thoroughgoing materialism, its denial of divine providence, creation, and immortal soul. It was just deemed too dangerous, incompatible with the synthesis of Platonic Aristotelian philosophy and Christian theology that dominated the era.
Seen as atheistic, heretical.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which led to its near-total suppression and intellectual obscurity. If you talked about atoms, you were asking for trouble.
But it came back. How?
Then came the Renaissance. The rediscovery and circulation of Lucretius's De Rerum Natura manuscript in the 15th century was a truly pivotal event, a philosophical earthquake.
Finding that poem again was that big a deal.
It dramatically reintroduced a coherent, systematic, non-teleological materialist philosophy to European thought after centuries of intellectual dormancy. Suddenly, there was this fully formed alternative worldview available again. This conceptual framework, a universe of particles moving in a void by mechanical laws, provided a powerful intellectual alternative to the dominant Aristotelian scholasticism that had held sway in universities for so long.
A different way to think about nature.
Precisely. This revived corpuscularian philosophy, as it was often called then, became a foundational influence for many of the key figures of the 17th century scientific revolution.
Like who?
Thinkers like Galilei, Robert Boyle, Isaac Newton. In their efforts to formulate a new mathematical physics, they adopted and adapted atomistic or corpuscular models to explain physical phenomena. They embedded a core Democritian concept reality, being composed of fundamental particles, into the very foundations of modern science.
Wow. So Democritus's core idea, passed through Epicurus and Lucretius, suppressed for centuries, comes roaring back to help fuel the scientific revolution.
It's a remarkable story of intellectual transmission and resurgence, bridging millennia, from an obscure ancient Greek philosopher to the very heart of the new scientific paradigm.
Incredible. So Democritus isn't just ancient history then. His ideas still echo, and you said scholars still debate him fiercely today.
Oh, absolutely. He's not just a historical curiosity. His ideas still spark vibrant debate. But studying him comes with its own unique set of scholarly challenges. As we touched on earlier, it's almost like philosophical archaeology.
Archaeology. Because the texts are gone.
Exactly. Modern scholarship on Democritus is fundamentally shaped by these methodological difficulties. Without his original texts, scholars have to reconstruct his vast system by painstakingly piecing together hundreds of disparate fragments and testimonia.
Testimonia being?
Those accounts preserved in the works of later authors who were often hostile or didn't fully grasp his ideas or were summarizing them for their own purposes. The monumental work of the 19th century German philologist Hermann Diels, Die Fragmente der Vorsokratiker, provided the foundational critical collection of all this scattered material, but the interpretive task remains immense.
Like rebuilding a mansion from scattered bricks and angry neighbor descriptions.
That's a perfect analogy. Key scholarly challenges include, definitively distinguishing Leucippus's contributions from Democritus's, assessing the authenticity of the ethical maxims. Are they really his? Or just later wise sayings attributed to him? And maybe the most difficult part, reconstructing complex physical and epistemological arguments from the often simplified or biased summaries provided by critics like Aristotle or later doxographers.
Doxographers.
Compilers of philosophical opinions. They weren't always aiming for deep understanding or accuracy, just summarizing views. So it's a constant battle against intellectual erosion and historical bias.
Okay, among these debates, what's the biggest one? The thorniest issue?
I'd say perhaps the most enduring and fascinating debate surrounding Democritus is that apparent contradiction we discussed earlier, the deep tension between his physics and his ethics.
Right, the determinism versus free will problem.
Exactly. On one hand, his physics, explicitly and rigidly deterministic, everything happens out of reason and by necessity. That implies all events, including human actions, are causally determined outcomes of prior atomic motions. No room for freedom.
But then his ethics.
The vast majority of his surviving fragments are ethical exhortations, urging individuals to choose virtue, control their desires, take responsibility for their character, all of which seems to presuppose that humans have some measure of agency, some control over their actions. You can't meaningfully tell someone to choose virtue if their choice was already determined billions of years ago by atomic collisions.
It really does seem like a flat contradiction. You mentioned Epicurus added the swerve to fix it. How do modern scholars handle it? Do they think Democritus just didn't see the problem?
Modern scholarly opinion is quite divided. Some interpret Democritus as a hard determinist, meaning free will is ultimately an illusion, and his ethics are simply a pragmatic guide to achieving tranquility within a system that is entirely predetermined, like advice on how to have the most pleasant predetermined life. Others argue for a compatibilist reading,
Compatibilist. They think determinism and free will are compatible.
or at least that Democritus might have thought so, or that his concepts of necessity and agency weren't mutually exclusive in the way we see them now. A compelling line of interpretation suggests Democritus himself likely did not perceive the problem in its sharp modern formulation. His primary goal might have been different:
What goal?
to replace the arbitrary and terrifying determinism of fate or divine caprice with a rational, intelligible determinism of natural law. To show the world wasn't chaotic or run by angry gods, but by understandable principles. From his perspective, understanding the causal laws that govern your own atomic soul might have been seen as enhancing, not diminishing, your capacity for self-governance.
How so? Knowing the rules helps you play the game better.
Kind of. Knowing the mechanics of your own mind and emotions, all rooted in atomic motions, might empower you to better manage those internal motions, leading more effectively to that calm, euthymic state. Knowledge is power, even within a deterministic system.
That's a different way to look at it. Less about freedom from causality, more about freedom through understanding causality.
Possibly. This is a debate that continues.
And closely related, I suppose, is the question of the unity of his thought. Did he see physics and ethics as one big project?
Yes, that's another key scholarly debate. Were his physics and ethics two distinct pursuits, maybe developed at different times or for different audiences? Or were they truly parts of one grand, integrated philosophical vision?
What makes people think they might be separate?
Well, the stylistic differences are noticeable. The reports on his physics often seem technical, complex. The ethical fragments are mostly these short, gnomic, aphoristic statements, pithy sayings. This difference has led some scholars to question the connection, or even, as I mentioned, the authenticity of some of the ethical material as genuinely Democritian. Maybe they were just tacked on later.
But others argue for unity.
Yes, a more holistic view, strongly argued by scholars like Gregory Vlastos back in the day, insists on a deep and systematic connection. And as our whole conversation today has suggested, this view seems quite compelling. The ethical goal of a tranquil soul, euthymia understood physically as harmonious atomic motion, is made possible only by the intellectual liberation provided by his physical theory.
Physics as the therapy for ethics again.
Exactly. In this holistic view, physics isn't separate from ethics. It is its necessary foundation. It serves that crucial therapeutic role by dispelling the fear and superstition that cause psychic disturbance, the very things that prevent euthymia. His entire philosophy, then, looks like a single integrated project aimed at human flourishing through a rational understanding of the universe, leading to inner peace and self-mastery. Physics, epistemology, ethics, all working together.
Okay. Stepping back then, looking at the whole picture, what's the final takeaway? Democritus' legacy.
Well, Democritus of Abdera's intellectual legacy is truly monumental, a towering achievement of ancient thought, no question. He formulated the first systematic and comprehensive materialist philosophy in the Western tradition, a worldview of startling power and coherence.
The atomic theory itself.
His atomic theory, even though it was arrived at through philosophical speculation, not an empirical experiment in the modern sense, was this triumph of rational inquiry. It anticipated the fundamental postulates of modern physical science by over 2 millennia. It's just staggering.
And the other big ideas.
His assertion of an infinite universe containing innumerable worlds, his purely mechanistic explanation of natural phenomena, his physicalist account of the soul. These were ideas so far ahead of his time, their full implications wouldn't really be grasped until the scientific revolution and even later.
His theory of knowledge, too.
Absolutely. His epistemology introduced that critical philosophical distinction between objective reality and subjective appearance, the primary-secondary quality problem. That remains central to philosophy of mind and science today. We still grapple with how our subjective experience relates to the objective world described by physics.
And finally, his ethics.
His ethics provided this compelling model of a fully naturalistic path to human flourishing, grounded in reason, moderation, self-mastery. entirely free from supernaturalism or external divine commands, a blueprint for inner peace achievable within a purely material, potentially deterministic universe.
So even with his works lost, his influence is undeniable.
Undeniable. Despite the loss of his writings and centuries of opposition, Democritus's core vision of a universe governed not by divine will or arbitrary purpose, but by intelligible, impersonal, natural law, that vision remains a cornerstone of the modern scientific worldview. That really secures his position as one of the most profound, original, and enduringly relevant thinkers in the entire history of philosophy.
A powerful reminder, then.
A powerful reminder that even in ancient times, the human mind, armed with just reason and insatiable curiosity, could conceive of ideas that would shape our understanding of reality for millennia. Ideas that still challenge and inspire us. He really compels us to ask, doesn't he? What other fundamental truths might our most radical thinkers be glimpsing today that maybe society just isn't quite ready for yet? Makes you wonder.
It certainly does. What an incredible mind to uncover today. Democritus truly laid groundwork that we're still building upon, both scientifically and philosophically. And yeah, his ideas continue to challenge us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the AI history of Western philosophy. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Democritus, please consider liking this episode, subscribing to our show for more philosophical explorations, or maybe leaving a comment to let us know your thoughts. We really do love hearing from you. Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep exploring the incredible ideas that shape our world.